Hello, in the last video, I shared thoughts on the synergy that can exist between spirituality, science, and faith. That was an overview of how each of these disciplines contributes to our well-being, aiding the ongoing evolution of all that supports life. Each, spirituality, science, and faith, can support us in our quest for truth, meaning, and the love of self and others, even pleasure and joy. And now let's focus on spirituality. Spirituality includes our conscious awareness of the fundamental truth that while we live, we know our material physical life will end at some point in time. Spirituality involves our non-material being, our psychological hunger for meaning and purpose in life, death, and what may lie beyond. This quest for spiritual meaning began to evolve within our prehistoric ancestors long before any current organized religion had formed. This began when a consciousness occurred that life had an endpoint in death. Fear and anxiety followed that awareness as it does today. As early as 300,000 years ago, in the Middle Paleolithic period of human development, signs of spiritual expression were discovered in art drawings depicting life, death, and what may happen after death. These signs were precursors to our concerns about life's meaning, along with similar fears and anxieties about death. In our death-denying culture, we hide from death behind our screens. Children grow up playing video war games where death is trivialized to the point of meaninglessness. We all see and hear the continual stream of news stories about the deaths of strangers around the world, from war, malnutrition, even from violence down our streets. The repetition of these very real deaths at a distance anesthetizes us to our own death and that of those we love until it occurs, leaving us little time to prepare. Our spiritual nature, however, allows us to explore the truth of that we who live will also physically die. Spirituality and psychological resources offer meaning and purpose for our living and in preparation for our dying. Spiritual disciplines help reduce the anxiety and fears we may carry, giving us a new, fresh perspective of what we had not previously explored. What is it that inspires you? What lifts your spirits? How and where do you find meaning for your being in the world and for when your material life ends? Our spiritual and psychological nature can enlighten us in so many ways, through dreams, for example, dreams we have while we sleep, or by meeting with a good friend, by finding a new friend, or by finding the solution to a vexing problem. Through entertainment, through the appreciation of art and music, literature, a play, humor, or a concert, or by a quiet, peaceful walk. By discovering a new hobby that brings joy, or the call to a new vocation. All these gifts are from our spiritual, psychological being, which can guide us to meaningful truths that bring us joy and peace. What awakens our spiritual and psychological nature is one of our greatest resources. It occurs from listening for meaning from events that we experience. Even the stresses that we oftentimes know can trigger a desire to learn new disciplines, to know who we are in the world, and to move beyond coping. Finding new meaning is not simply learning to cope with techniques for psychological pain, which may lead to physical pain. Enlightenment goes to the core of who we are and what we experience, enhancing life's meaning and purpose. This involves the human pursuit of meaning and fulfillment found in the gift of life. Our spiritual nature draws us toward the truth of who we are throughout time. Whether that truth reflects our joy or our sorrow, our inner peace or a bitter conflict highlighted by fear, frustration, anxiety, or doubt. Truth incorporates our illnesses and acceptance of those illnesses, even when leading to death. There is no one religious understanding of spirituality. Each faith has over time added to a spiritual gumbo, giving all that is spiritual a depth and a breadth with which both nourishes and enlightens the souls of those who seek the richness of what it means to exist in the world as a human being. Humanity gains from the diverse spiritual perspectives of faith. Buddhism, Confucius, Hinduism, Taoism, Eastern and Western Christianity, Judaism, and many, many more. But it is not dependent upon any one faith. The world's paths toward spiritual awareness and the soul, or the union even with a divine being, have emerged in different ways from different locations, times, and circumstances. As I said, this began with the consciousness of our prehistoric ancestors, who became concerned about life and death, and they wondered, perhaps, how life began and what life meant, what happened to them and the members of their families when they died. Spiritual questions and practices about life and death migrated as our prehistoric ancestors did, moving from the continent of Africa to the Middle East and Europe and other continents beyond. Spiritual concepts evolved from up to 300,000 years ago and were depicted in the religious art on the cave walls of that time period. Today, the continuing global migration of people enables spiritual views and practices to be shared and appreciated. Through friendships and marriages, each generation may learn new spiritual perspectives and practices. How this spirituality viewed in the Western world is interesting because it predominates in our way of knowing the world. It is a composite of many world religions, most strongly from Christianity, which adopted Judaism's perspectives, beginning with the creation myths found in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis. Now, parts of that biblical creation myth were drawn from the earlier Babylonian creation myth called the Enuma Elish. That was written in 1750 BC, which was 300 years before Genesis was written in 1456 BC. In the first two verses of Genesis are found the Jewish and the subsequent Christian perspective of spirituality that many of us share. In the beginning, it says, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Here, the word spirit came from the Hebrew word ruach, meaning breath, wind, or spirit. Now, this word ruach was later translated to the word spiritus when the Bible was translated into Latin When the Bible was later translated to English, the original word ruach became the English word spirit, with the same original meaning as ruach, breath, wind. In the Genesis version of creation, it was spirit that brought life to the world. So for much of the Western culture and beyond, spirit and spiritual aspects are represented by the breath of life. For example, what enters a newborn, each one of us, at the moment of birth is her or his first breath, and what leaves at the end of life, at the time of death, is her or his final breath. Every breath we take can be considered as a spiritual and physical gift required for life as we know it. God and God's Spirit were understood together as the force which initiates, supports, guides, and sustains all species of life. Again, this is only one example of a creation story, not the only faith through which people have come to understand and express their spirituality. In fact, some are not even dependent upon a concept of God at all. There is the Jewish faith, Buddhism, Hinduism, the Muslim faith, and many other current faiths have enriched the world with their spiritual perspectives. Yet long ago, long before current world religions, as I said, our ancestors expressed their spiritual and religious views. So this is nothing new. We see that concepts of spirituality, like those of science and faith, are not static. They have evolved globally, giving meaning to life and that which lies beyond life for those who live at a given time. Spiritual practices might help one focus introspectively on the meaning of life, one's place in the world, on drawing closer to a divine being, if your faith believes there is a divine being, or on the nature of one's spirit or soul following death. For some, the pursuit of spiritual well-being is not seen as separate from physical well-being. Here, the physical and spiritual being of a person is seen as an undivided whole. In addition to supporting personal health, purpose, and well-being, spiritual growth can help us come to value all that supports life. This may occur through practices such as meditation, reflection, fasting, contemplation, dreams, fantasies, and prayer. These spiritual disciplines may guide us to responses of respect, care, kindness, love for self, and attention to the needs of others through empathy, which can lead to transformational justice. These spiritual practices can enlighten us toward purposeful living in support of each species of life on Earth and the ecosystems that maintain them. They can also enable us to find joy, satisfaction, and purpose in our human experience. Spiritual practices, together with science, help us become conscious of our interconnectedness with the earth on which we reside, within the universal context, or cosmos, which is continually changing, growing, creating, and recreating itself through the death of stars like the sun and the birth of new stars. Spiritual growth may come very, very gradually in our lives, over years of mentoring and study and discipline, yet it also may come very dramatically, in an instant, from a newly discovered scientific truth, a dream that we have, an illness, or a personal loss which causes us to reevaluate life's meaning into a new awareness, a revelation of who we are in the infinite cosmos. Our spiritual nature encourages us to imagine, explore, and find the truth of our total being with all our blemishes. Now, this includes our fears, our self-doubt, as well as our impotence, our mistakes in loving ourselves and others, and our personal truth will change and grow through life. Spiritual truth expands our conscious awareness, opening our eyes even to injustices we may participate in without our being aware we are doing so. Spirituality gives life support to our aspirations to become our best selves, challenging us to evaluate what we do in light of those aspirations and within the context of a community. This is a lifelong truth-finding discipline. Since we become distracted and confused, or because our behavior falls short in our quest to find meaning and purpose. I hope it's clear that humanity is not dependent upon or bound by any one faith tradition to experience spirituality. Like each breath we take, our spiritual and physical well-being intersect, they come together. They are accessible to all of us, regardless of a traditional, organized religious faith. Still, most faith traditions seem to speak a similar, common spiritual language: love of self, love of neighbor. These may be two universal hallmarks of spirituality. Perhaps spirituality is a precursor to life itself, beginning in the DNA of our predecessors, our prehistoric ancestors, long before we were born and well before the prenatal care given to us by our mothers, when we were infants and children, if we were fortunate enough to have been well cared for and loved. Spirituality was present, if not understood or discussed. It enables us to grow, explore our own self-care, and then express concern for the well-being of others, and later empathize with them and other living species. Our past spiritual experiences might be affirmed by three questions. Have I been loved? Do I know how to care for and love myself? And have I loved others? If we can say yes to those questions, then we have had spirituality within our presence. We have been able to acknowledge it, to affirm it as good, from an environment of love, empathy, trust, and hope. I believe most people have times of feeling spiritually disconnected from life, not the whole, complete, fulfilled people we desire to be. At those times, we may question whether we are beloved. I was recently reminded how rewarding it can be to share a simple gift, a spiritual gift, with virtual strangers. The gift, an affirmation of the stranger's being in the world as a good thing. Let me explain. I walk a great deal. I enjoy walking in one or two nearby parks where I live. As I walk, I pass by many other people. I said I share spiritual gifts with strangers rather than I say I give them a spiritual gift, because nearly all those I greet reciprocate my greeting. The spiritual gift of a greeting is shared, received, and then returned. The spiritual gifts I share will vary, but always include a welcoming of that person's presence into our shared space as we approach each other and pass by. An accepted acknowledgement that affirms that person exists in the world as a good thing. They are a human being human. All this from a simple smile, a head nod, a wave, one of several affirmations such as hello, good morning. Does this simple act change the world? Let's look and see. As passing, we unite for a brief moment. Again, each spiritual affirmation asserts that the person's existence in the world is noteworthy and good. The one receiving that gift of affirmation has no obligation to return the gift. Spirituality in this example affirms another's presence. Simply, briefly, yet powerfully. The being of another human being in the world is highlighted as a good thing, a blessing, in fact. Now, does such a seemingly small blessing, a gesture acknowledging his or her goodness, change the world? I believe it does. In our impersonal world, it may change the world of the one receiving the blessing, if only for a moment, and yet such a spiritual blessing may then grow legs. It may travel from that person going anywhere in the world. And where in this impersonal world is that type of blessing not needed? Our desire for spiritual truth inspires us to see our world in fresh ways, locally and globally. As we perceive the world more inclusively, broadly and clearly, we see issues of which we are unaware, or issues about which we were callously unmoved. For example, the world's population continues to grow faster than some nations' ability to support their people with food or clean water or housing or education. Even many developed countries, such as the United States, lack the will to restructure their budgets and build an economy adequate to support their people's employment needs, to feed and educate their families for the future. Individuals and nations are often preoccupied with the busyness of life. We may not make room in our schedules to consider or appreciate our own spiritual need for love, for acceptance, meaning, let alone the same needs of our neighbors or of the earth. Fortunately, spiritual consciousness can expand. At any age, our eyes can open to issues we have overlooked. We can educate ourselves to our needs and those of others. Following our education, spiritual truth leads us to our agency, our ability to take action and change the way we live. Spirituality's role seems to be found in that which creates, supports, inspires one's imagination, and this raises consciousness to explore and understand life's many meanings. Formalized systems of faith and science, in their different ways, have sought the inspiration and the guidance of spiritual truth, a truth that reminds us that all life is sacred. Our personal life journey may reveal that when we attend to our spiritual nature, it illuminates what was previously unknown to us. At any time, mid-career or when we retire, we may discover an unknown passion for nature, for gardening, for painting, for writing, for teaching, for any of the creative arts. Our spiritual nature is our guidance system, inspiring us to explore more of who we are in the context of our complex world. We are, as human beings, part of the natural world which deserves respect and care. We are whole, complete, and good because we exist. We are integrated as whole human beings by nature of our common construction, from subatomic particles to molecules to cells, organs, biochemistry, and the genetic glue that binds us together. We are all, by nature, literally related to each other. Perhaps that is the most interesting, practical, even humorous truth we can obtain from our spiritual growth. Our next video looks into the important role science can play in seeking truth about the natural world, which can also bring light, life, and hope to our world. And finally, we'll conclude this series on spirituality, science, and faith by looking at the role that faith may play in maintaining spiritual light and scientific truth for the benefit of the world. Thank you again for listening. Please share this with a friend if you find it to be helpful. And if you would like to comment on this or any of the videos on this site, please open a chat or send me an email. Thank you.